Hi, I'm John Nerrill, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. It is great to have you here for another interview. And as I look forward to my conversation today with Dean Cox, I want to pause for a moment and have you think about how your skills transfer to a new position. We know that one of the biggest hurdles mid-career professionals face is figuring out how they want to pivot. Now, if you're considering such a pivot, you're probably pretty clear as to why you are seeking a change. You can insert whatever reasons you want there for that. But when you think about yourself in one box and try to see yourself in a different one, that's where it can be a bit challenging and where maybe considering hiring a coach can be a great investment for you to explore and consider some potential action steps on whatever those steps may be. Now, my guest and I share a similar background in terms of our love for education and coaching. And there is no doubt that as we talk about his mid-career journey today, you are going to get a few ideas about which career pathway your GPS may take you, especially if you are considering more leadership opportunities and how to navigate some of those detours along the way. So let me tell you about my guest. Dean Cox has more than 30 years of experience in the world of learning and in his work as a coach. He has helped build learning plans for individuals and teams to enhance job skills, build strengths, and increase awareness of different working and thinking styles. Dean has a proven track record of coaching and consulting for those who are designing, developing, and implementing their own programs. His specialties include coaching facilitation skills, leadership skills, and helping individuals overcome personal barriers that keep them from reaching their true potential. Prior to becoming a leadership and team effectiveness coach, Dean spent more than 25 years in different forms of education for both adults and children, and found that understanding the similarities and differences has instilled in him the necessity for knowing an audience and their needs. Now, I want you to listen very closely to this next part of the bio, because when we come from a place of value and service and we start tagging accomplishments, you may not have similar ones, but these are some of the data points that really make people's ears perk up and take notice. Some of Dean's noted accomplishments include creating an internal peer coaching program that provided relational learning space and allowed experienced leaders the opportunity to take on the role of mentor coach. And this resulted in an annual savings of $250,000 that was previously spent on external coaching services. He designed and managed a multi-year program for building facilitation skills within a Fortune 100 corporation for over 200 participants. He established a development-based process for debriefing 360 assessments by collaborating on best practices with more than 20 professionals around the country. And he has recruited, trained, and managed a pool of over 30 coaches for a leadership development program of 250 participants through the unpredictability of the 2020 pandemic. Dean Cox holds a Bachelor of Science in Education from the University of Illinois and has earned certification as a professional certified coach from the ICF, the International Coach Federation, and is a certified professional coach by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. Dean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I need to carry you around with me everywhere I go.
I am happy to be your PR guy if you need one.
It is almost overwhelming to hear all of that in one nugget.
Well, and we talked right before we started recording, but it's one of the things I love having my guest hear all that stuff come back to them, because when we talk about our career journeys and especially what has happened in mid-career, it is that kind of like moment where you sit there and feel all of that kind of wash over you and get to take that all in. So I think that's a really nice way for us to start today.
It is. Thanks.
You're most welcome. All right. As we get into talking all about you and who you are and what you do and what mid-career has been like for you, we got to take it back a little bit, because one of the first questions I love asking my guests is, so what did you want to be when you were growing up?
A teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, that it was very early on, probably as early as kindergarten or first grade, that I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Now, it may not have been for all the right reasons back then. It may have just been that I wanted to be in charge.
I get that.
But that notion of being a teacher stuck with me, like throughout my childhood into junior high and high school. And I do have a lot of teachers in my family tree, so it is something that's part of me. And so it was really interesting, because during that phase of our earlier education, when everyone is trying to make decisions about what they want to be when they grow up, what college are they going to go to, and what are they going to major in, and all that stuff, I had already decided all that. I decided I wanted to be a teacher, so I was going to major in education. I decided to go to University of Illinois because I grew up in Illinois, and it's where my older brother went, so I had some familiarity with it. And yeah, all those decisions just seemed to be made for me. Well, I made them for me.
Right. What did you end up teaching?
Well, and that's the funny part. I didn't. And herein lies my first pivot. I graduated with my degree in education, and I decided, nope, that is not what I want to do. And so that was a big shock to my system. Here I am, age 22, with a college degree in something that I had no desire to pursue further. So I just needed to find a job at that point. And at that point, I probably wasn't looking at it as, oh, I have an opportunity to do anything. I just needed to find a job to pay rent, et cetera. So I landed in the restaurant industry. It's an industry that I still to this day love. I miss that kind of work. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Spent some time there, and then answered a newspaper ad back when we had those.
Those days, yes.
There was an airline hiring at O'Hare Airport, and I decided to give that a try. I was successful in that, so then I pivoted to the travel industry and spent almost 10 years there. And during that time, transferred from the Chicago area to Central Ohio, where I live now in Columbus, with this major carrier. And there were a few of us around that 10-year mark that started making the jump into corporate America. So there's the next pivot.
All right, so let me stop you for a second, because
Okay.
this is lighting me up on all these different levels here, right? So you make this decision to go into the travel industry. What exactly did you do for them? Can you share with us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I worked for a major airline, and I did just about everything you can do on the ground except mechanic. So ticket counter, gates, baggage service, operations. I did weight and balance for Boeing 737s, 757s.
Wow.
But what I found throughout all of these roles that I had after graduating high school or graduating college was that I either formally or informally was a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still had that teaching theme throughout. So when I did end up in corporate America, first couple of years I was in an administrative role, and then I landed a training position where I was training Excel and Word and PowerPoint at, of all things, a very large insurance company. I knew nothing about insurance. If someone had said even a year before that I would be working for an insurance company, I would have been like, why would I work for an insurance company? And I'm making that point very specifically for a reason. But I ended up in a training role, doing very procedural training and loved it. I had a blast.
Mm-hmm.
And then as that portion of my career evolved, I ended up moving into more what I call insight-based learning, more of the conceptual, like emotional intelligence, like leadership training, specifically, talking about company culture and things like that. And found that to be a very smooth transition as well. And I loved doing that kind of work.
And I would imagine that in everything that you had done up to that point, that what you are seeing, what you are hearing, what you are all taking in, like the wheels are turning in your head about how can I improve? How can I help them improve? How can I help them be better leaders or be a better organization? And where does my genius as a trainer and a facilitator, as an educator, help them reach that goal?
Absolutely. Yeah, I find that even the smallest amount of growth is a win.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's an individual human being or an organization, if there's some kind of growth or those light bulb moments, that is what is gratifying for everyone involved. So yeah, I look for those.
When we were leading up to this conversation and just sent you a few things to think about, and there was a quote that you shared from Aristotle, that is, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. I'd love for you to talk with us a little bit about why that quote means so much to you and where that quote, I'm going to do a bad coaching thing and stack a question, and where it's funny when coaches get together, we're like, oh, I shouldn't do that. But no, like, why is that quote so important to you? And, where has that helped you throughout your career?
Yeah, it's one of those, when I stumbled across it, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I thought, oh my gosh, it's so simple. And that's it. That's exactly what it has really clicked for me. Now, granted, Aristotle probably didn't say it in English, but it just seems so simple. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And it's even on the back of my business cards. Because I think if someone had shared that quote with me in my 20s, I would have been like, yeah, big deal. But that truly is the gold nugget. We have so many different styles, different defaults, things that just happen that we just think are who we are. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of it is wiring. Some of these are defaults that can actually change if it's a default that's getting in your way. For example, a default thought, like if someone cuts you off in traffic, you might have some kind of a default thought that that person's a jerk.
I can relate to that. Yeah.
I think a lot of us can, right? And, maybe that person is a jerk. Who knows? But we don't know. And maybe that ruined your day. Maybe you allowed it to ruin your day. That person is off living their day, not thinking about you. But instead, we can have different default thoughts, and that's one of the things I really love about coaching is helping people discover, have that awareness of their different thinking patterns and what are some of the things that maybe they are getting in their own way. And some of it can really be quite simple, but there's even, that's just kind of a mental awareness. There's also emotional awareness. There's behavioral awareness, talent awareness. There's motivational awareness, all these things that make up the unique individual we are, that the more you know yourself, the more you're going to feel successful.
I completely agree with you on that. That awareness component, especially when I think about that mid-career component, when people start to level up, when they get that first opportunity where they're leading a team or they're leading a project, and the responsibilities start to increase. And what I have found is that if you take somebody who is at like that just beginning part of their mid-career journey and they've been this high performer or this high potential, and they're celebrated by their organization, and everything for them has, for the lack of a better term, come easy for them.
Mhm.
And they get elevated and they get moved into a leadership role, and the organization is thinking they've got it, and the person themselves is just struggling. Right. And so now they're a little hesitant about saying something or figuring out where to get support or resources from. And their biggest fear is they don't want to fail. But
Right.
when they do struggle and all of a sudden, quote unquote, work becomes hard,
Mhm.
now they're left trying to deal with their own awareness of where they are in these situations. And oftentimes, what can happen is that they will either, and we know this in our training, but they will either fight
Mhm.
or they will take flight.
Yep.
When they take flight, they leave that organization with everything the organization has invested in them. And now they're an asset to somebody else, but they never really corrected the issue
Right.
that's going on.
Because the same pattern will probably occur
Absolutely.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to look externally at things, and a lot of people tend to look at something to blame if they don't have life balance. Well, it's because of that over there. And until you look inward and really understand yourself, it's going to be really difficult to break some of those patterns.
Your leadership development, both in your corporate life and in your coaching practice, is without question really fascinating in terms of who you get to help and things. And I want to put a really specific lens on this because of what we have seen in light of the pandemic and in light of the last year and a half or so. What would you say that leaders need right now in terms of support to help them be more effective in their roles?
The way we build relationships has always been critical. And a lot of people try to continue the way they build relationships the same way they used to when we were all in person. And I think being in the virtual environment, we can learn a lot about, having compassion for other people's place. Everybody's situation is different in this virtual world with people working remotely. And, there's the obvious ones, like the people who have children. Mm-hmm. And they are having to juggle being a teacher and being an employee all at the same time. And there are thousands and thousands of other examples of how people's situations are different from when they used to drive into work and go sit in a cubicle. And as leaders, we can't look at these people and follow the same patterns that we always did. I think your relationship development with people has to change when you're in a remote relationship, and having compassion and understanding that that person's circumstances are very different. And that a person might need to work from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Mm-hmm. instead of 8 to 5, and so it's changing a lot of our own biases, I think. First of all, being aware of them, being aware of those biases before you can change them. And then recognizing, how is this person continuing to contribute, or what can I do to help that person continue to contribute? So really looking at how you build relationships with people and how that has changed in the remote environment, I think is probably one of the most critical things.
It's so well said, right? And it's one of those things where, we can look back to over a year ago and sit here and go, gosh, right now I've been able to do it, right? It's been comfortable and I'm getting used to this whole thing. And
it was novel.
It was novel. Exactly. Right. And as more and more companies start bringing people back to the work site in whatever capacity, and we're going to see, I think, a big shift in dynamic in all of that as well. But this whole notion about how do we get to be most effective in our jobs and do that kind of quality of work will
Absolutely.
Always be at the forefront of any kind of leadership conversation.
Yeah. And I think, it's recognizing that everybody coming back to the workplace, things are not just going to go back to how they were. It's not just a matter of, oh, cool, we get to flip the switch now and everybody gets to go back. No, those children might not be going in person to school yet. So there are all kinds of variables where we need to recognize that people are going through another major change. The whole going home thing was a big change in so many ways. Well, we can't, we can't look at this and say, oh, well, this isn't a big deal. They're just going back to work like they always did. It's another big change, and we have to be aware of how resilient people are able to be.
When you were talking earlier about leaders and building relationships, and that being something that has always been integral in a leadership role, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are in leadership roles, or they're aspiring even to a leadership role for the first time, or a greater leadership role than they're already in. I'm wondering if you can share with us just some of your leadership best practices or advice for someone who's growing their leadership capacity. And what are some of the things that they may need to focus on as they're building their GPS toward whatever is next?
Sure. I would say, and it's interesting because, when we talk about leadership, traditional leadership, generally we're talking about people who have direct reports, people who are leading a team. Yet there's this concept out there that every single one of us is a leader.
Right.
And, at the very least, we lead ourselves. And so I think what's interesting is occasionally we find ourselves in informal leadership roles. And when you think of what leadership is, it's when you are there to inspire people so they want to follow you, And so it doesn't have to even be a direct report situation. We lead every day. And I think one of the greatest things that I learned, and I'll be honest, I still struggle with it now and then, is letting go of that ego. When someone has feedback for you, when someone wants to complain about something to you, you listen and you put yourself in their place and you think about what is it that they're feeling right now and why does that make sense? Because here's the thing, it makes sense. It makes sense for them to be feeling a certain way that would have triggered an angry email or something like that. So instead of shooting back another angry email, which is going to accomplish absolutely nothing, but maybe, damage the relationship, instead, look into that anger and say, I can tell, or I understand why this person is angry. Because of their situation, it makes perfect sense that they would be angry. So it's putting your ego in check and understanding you might not have been right about something. You may need some course correction, and take that in and apologize and say, I'm going to do it this way from now on. Thanks for your feedback, type of thing. It's much easier to do over email in a remote situation than it is in person. So that's one of the good things about remote.
That is true.
Because you can sit back and you can say, whoa. But yeah, I think really watching the role that your ego plays when you're receiving feedback or handling a complaint or anything like that, and making sure you're really putting yourself in that person's place.
And I like what you said earlier too about, we have to get more aware of our default thinking. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that ties in really nicely with the whole checking the ego at the door and those kind of things. From an organizational lens, and you've had an opportunity to be part of building an internal coaching program and supporting leaders internally. What were the benefits that you saw by having internal coaches? and growing leadership capacity in that way from the organizational perspective of things?
I think the value of coaching skills, there are way too many organizations out there who still think coaching is advice giving. Mm-hmm. And so just turning that giant ship, helping people understand, first of all, what coaching is and the value it can bring, I think is the greatest value right there. And I think it really helps people understand that the leader doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. If you think about, let's stick with the theme of career development. Mm-hmm. When you have a direct report who is kind of like hemming and hawing about what they want to do for their career and all that, it's not up to the leader to tell this person what they're going to do for their career. It's up to the leader to coach, to ask some of those questions, to dig deeper, to help that person understand who they are and what value they bring that will hopefully lead them to something that is more fulfilling for them. Or to be happy with the job they have right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It can
right.
happen either way.
Yeah. I mean, it's that awareness and discovery where a coach just opens up the space to let them figure that all out. Right. I mean, if you want advice on what you should be doing, I'm sure there are people listening who have plenty of people in their lives who are more than happy to tell them what they should be doing.
Right. Go talk to friends, go talk to family. They'll give you advice.
Absolutely. Right.
But that doesn't empower you to make the choices that are necessary to be made.
No. And there's one particular pain point I want to pull you in here on this conversation when we talk about, be it leadership development, career development, even just coaching in general. But if we think about that person who is inside of that organization and they're really questioning their pivot, and you and I tend to work with people who are very heart-centered leaders. They mm-hmm. put everybody else before them, right? They're yep. caregiving and nurturing and all of that. And to use one of your phrases, right? It can be difficult for heart-centered leaders to quote unquote toot their own horn, to really come from that place of here's the value I bring and here's how I can serve and here's how I can make this better. What advice, Dean, do you have for these heart-centered leaders to get out of their own way and just focus on here's how you can toot your own horn and do it pretty gracefully?
Yes. Well, first of all, advice for heart-centered leaders is make sure you're setting some healthy boundaries. Because yes. when you are living your life for everyone else and doing things for everyone else and being that servant leader, which there's nothing wrong with being a servant leader, but recognizing boundaries, make sure the self-care is in there. So I know that's not answering your question, but that is one way that
that's a great point.
Servant leaders can really strike some life balance. I would say around tooting your own horn, because we hear that all the time, John. You've coached plenty of people who are going into an interview situation and they get all squirmy around, oh, but I don't like talking about myself and all that, which that's all well and good. However, there is a time when we really need to talk about who we are and what we bring. And I think that's the key. When we have that awareness that we talked about earlier of our skills, our values, of our talents, all of those things that we bring to the table, we can talk about them as if they are outside of us. So you can point to that particular talent. You can point to a particular accomplishment, if you will. And it's easier to talk about that. And then at the end, tie it all up and say, this is what I bring to your organization. You only talk about yourself that little bit. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about those other things in sort of I'll call it a third person way, but you're not going to use third person, obviously. Right. But you could talk about those things as objects and then wrap it up and say, this is who I am and this is what I bring to you.
I love that. That's really, really good. And And it takes practice, right? It's that
Loads.
awareness, loads of it, right? It's that awareness. I tell my clients all the time, like, you need to hear yourself saying this by yourself first, because we process things very differently when we hear them in air,
Oh,
as
yeah.
opposed to when we're saying it to ourselves, kind of whispering, and we hear it in bone in the inner part of our ear. You need to be able to like hear yourself saying those things so you can get past the ego part you were talking about earlier and be like, oh, I don't know how that sounds, or oh,
Right.
I don't like the way it's right. And so you get in the car to go get your latte, or you go to the supermarket and you're shattering off or rattling off that statement or that value that you have, and just practicing that over and over and over again. So when you do get in front of somebody, it doesn't sound awkward or uncomfortable as if you had
Mhm.
never practiced it before.
Yeah, when it comes out of your mouth, it can sound totally different. There are people out there who love to journal, who love to write everything out, and that's awesome. Start out that way. Make sure you're saying it out loud as well.
Yeah. You also have this great ability to connect and to pull people in, both organizationally and externally, and bring groups of people together and get them to be cohesive. What's your advice for someone to help them intentionally build their network right now?
It is a matter of, I think a lot of people focus on building their network, and they tend to neglect the importance of maintaining their network. And after the more recent transition I've had in my career, where I retired from corporate America and I'm out on my own, running my own business in semi retirement,
Mm-hmm.
I am finding that there are some very deliberate things I need to do to maintain my network, because I'm not in meetings with people that I was seeing every day, even over Zoom. So it's a matter of being conscious about reconnecting with people maybe you haven't talked to in several months. And it doesn't have to be robotic, it doesn't have to be inauthentic. It can be, hey, I was doing this the other day and I thought about you and wondered how you're doing. Let's catch up for a half hour if you have a break sometime.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that simple. And you've written about it, John. You've got many different ways of, helping people think about networking differently. A lot of people think of networking as, they get a lump in their throat when they hear that
Oh
word.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And, that's because we all think about networking. Oh, I'm going to go and pass out business cards and shake hands at an event. I'm going to feel really uncomfortable. That's not what true networking
Right.
is. I mean, it's really recognizing the relationships you have in your life, and recognizing, again, the value you bring to that relationship. So it's not all about you. It's not all about them. It's about the relationship. And when you can focus on the relationship with another person, a relationship with another organization, and think about that as an entity, what are you going to do to maintain that? What are you going to do to nurture that?
Mm-hmm. Such good advice, and to do it one person at a time, and to find
Mm-hmm.
those ways to just re-energize or reconnect with people who you haven't had chance. Look, this past year plus has been challenging at best, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to find those kind of ways to just reconnect on some level is a great way to meaningfully and intentionally build those relationships we have one person at a time.
Yeah. And we all have the tools to do it.
Yes.
We all have email. I mean, so you don't even have to have a fancy LinkedIn profile or anything for that kind of stuff. If you have email, if it's a person that is in your network already, chances are they're in your phone. And maybe they're a texter.
Yes. Yeah.
So it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be anything complex.
Got it. Well, you have taken us down this wonderful road, and we have covered everything from education and training and organizational development and leadership growth and everything. And as we're kind of winding down right now, and it's always amazing to me how quickly the time goes, but as we're winding down right now, Dean, what advice would you have for someone who is currently building their mid-career GPS and navigating this part of their career to help them figure out whatever is next?
I would say really be careful of what you set as a target. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, and this starts in childhood, a lot of people, what do you want to be when you grow up? They think of a job, a specific job, or even a job title, or maybe a hierarchical level that they want to be a VP in some organization. They also might think of particular industries. And earlier when I brought up that, if someone had told me a year before I'd be working for an insurance company, I'd be like, what, are you crazy? I don't know anything about insurance. I didn't have any interest in insurance. If you do that, that automatically closes out and dismisses entire giant pots of gold jobs that are out there. So, you might not have any interest in insurance, but don't discount the insurance industry. There is a wide variety of jobs in every industry. Maybe it's something in the medical field. You don't necessarily have to have a medical background. My 23 years in the insurance industry led me to the coaching profession. And, it's been an amazing journey. And I am forever thankful for the opportunities that I had in the insurance industry. And I never actually worked directly with insurance. So be careful of where you're setting your targets. And not that it's a bad thing to set targets, but be aware of those things in the periphery that you may accidentally be dismissing through different biases. So that's what I would say is, broaden those horizons. Think much bigger than you're thinking now.
Well said. Well said. Well, look, my friend, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been great. And I appreciate you so much. And it was such a valuable conversation, I know, for myself and for anybody who was listening. But if people who are listening want to get in touch with you or contact you, what's the best way they can go ahead and do that?
My website is available at strongestlinkcc.com. And that CC stands for coaching and consulting.
Got it.
So strongestlinkcc.com. And there is a contact form there.
Great.
Fill that out. I get an email and I will be in touch with whoever wants to hear from me.
Perfect. I will make sure that is in the show notes and we have all that. But Dean, thanks again so much for spending some time today. I really appreciate it.
This has been a lot of fun. I'm glad I could be here with you.
Same here. Absolutely. Everyone, take care. Make it a great rest of the day. If you have not joined my private Facebook group called Your Mid-Career GPS, I certainly look forward to seeing you there. It is a great community of like-minded professionals who are all trying to figure out what's next. And we get to have these conversations inside of the group and support each other. So it would be great if you would go and check that out. And I wish you a great rest of the day. Stay safe and be well. Just be a little nicer to each other. All right. I'll see you next time. Take care. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, follow on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. And I'd appreciate it if you would leave a rating and review. Visit johnnarroll.com to download your free copy of the 55-minute career transition jumpstart to help you start building your mid-career GPS. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narroll Coaching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.